have seen suffering, devastation, and a massive scale of loss of life. Let me share with you some of the sobering statistics. At least we have 15.7 million people in Ukraine now who are in urgent need of humanitarian assistance and protection. As of today, over 5 million people fled Ukraine to seek safety in other countries, and another 7.1 million are being internally displaced across the country. This represents about 25% of the total population of Ukraine. This is a big number. The destruction of civilian infrastructures at massive scale since the war started, we see that more than 140 health facilities have come under attack. Severe damage of water system that left about 6 million people without regular access to water. And also an average of 22 schools a day have come under attack in a way or another. In my report, the uncertainty over the fate of the civilian population is a concern to us. The people living in the Kherson continue to confront tremendous challenges with reported shortages of water, food, medicine, and other amenities. In Mykolaiv, people have been without water for several days, and that's the case in many other villages in the east. Across the oblasts, and especially in Donetsk, Luhansk, Kharkiv, Kievska, and Chernivtska, devastation of urban center and destruction of civilian structure have made life unbearable for millions of people, severely disrupted critical services including healthcare and access to water. We are concerned about the impact on civilian infrastructure, and we consider it as a clear violation of international humanitarian law, and civilians must be protected and allowed safe passage. The humanitarian phase is tremendous. We as humanitarian face tremendous challenges in carrying out our daily work. On many occasions, we prevented from reaching areas where people are in desperate need of assistance. I appeal to safe and unhindered access for humanitarian assistance and allowing civilians to also come out to safety. We have seen people returning, but a lot of them are returning to nothing. With over 12 million people displaced, durable solutions to self-displacement cannot wait. People are returning to empty places, to empty villages. Going home after having been forced to flee is one of the most normal humanitarian desires. I can understand that longing for home by many displaced Ukrainians. As the United Nations and together with our humanitarian development partners, we must be ready to support their durable solution from the start. That means putting the last first, as we are just continuing to provide humanitarian assistance, but look at the short-term development and durable solution needs. In closing, I would like to echo the Secretary General's call for restraint and humanitarian pause to allow for safe passage of civilians and for the safe delivery of urgent humanitarian aid to people in need. And I also underscore the need to put aside divisions and focus on covering the interests of all and end the senseless war. I now also would like to give the floor to the resident and humanitarian coordinator, Osnat Lovani. Welcome, Osnat. I give you the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Amin. And I just want to introduce myself and sorry for the delay. We arrived a bit late. My name is Sardiano Abreu. I work for the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. We support.
Thank you, Sardiano, for.
Thank you, Amin. Thank you. Thank you for the great overview of the situation here. And as you said, I'm not gonna delay much. I just want to invite Osnat Obrani for giving her remarks on the humanitarian response here in the country. Amin was talking about the humanitarian situation, the main figures. Now Osnat is going to give us some news on the response, the people that we managed to reach over the last 2 months, and also some news on the allocation that we're doing today for responding the response. So welcome, Osnat, please.
Thank you, Amin. And thank you to all the journalists that are here today and also online. So you all heard the crisis coordinator speaking about the situation, and I just want to start by echoing all of our concern, all of the UN agencies and our partners over the escalation of hostilities and the devastating toll it is taking on Ukrainian civilians and on civilian infrastructure across the country. As we see from day to day, the situation is worsening. Just over the past days, there have been airstrikes in Kiev, Lugansk, Donetsk, Kharkiv, and here in Lviv, hitting residential buildings, causing civilian casualties, including people that were killed, whose lives were lost here in Lviv. So I also say, together with Amin and everyone, we need for all of this to stop. But at the same time, all of us are so committed to continuing to do all possible to reach all the Ukrainians in need of urgent assistance. And I want to also highlight in particular my deep worry that this war is affecting women disproportionately and in many ways deepening inequalities. The increased number in allegations of sexual violence perpetrated against women and girls is horrifying, and these all need to be investigated, and already now we have to ensure that there are support services in place to help survivors of such atrocities. And I'm sure my colleagues perhaps from UNHCR and Карітас can share more specific challenges and risks in Ukraine that women are facing, including those that had to flee to other countries. Over these past 2 months, aid workers from local and international NGOs and UN agencies have been working day and night to scale up our response and assist people affected by the devastation and destruction. And this is alongside, of course, the work of so many amazing volunteers. Yesterday we finally managed to reach Chernihiv with 9 trucks of critical food, blankets and other household items to people in a city that has been besieged until recently and is heavily affected by the war. I want to say that we have so far been able to reach with life-saving assistance to over 3.3 million people in Ukraine. This means that 3.2, if I break it down, 3.2 could put food on the table for their families, 1 million were treated or received critical health care support across the country, 225,000 could access clean water and hygiene products, 221,000 people uprooted, internally displaced, received emergency shelter and critical household items, and education services for children who had to flee their homes and their schools are now reaching 88,000 children. Now, this has only been possible thanks to the tireless efforts of over 190 organizations, and I want to tell you that over half of these are Ukrainian national NGOs, their staff and volunteers across the country who, with support of generous donors, are doing all possible to reach people in need, notwithstanding so many security risks. And I also want to remind you that it was 2 months ago that all of our humanitarian focus was only on 2 oblasts, and right now we are operating across all of the 24. So this has been an unprecedented change in just 2 months. But the needs are so great, and this is why I'm here today to announce the release of $50 million from the Ukraine Humanitarian Fund to support NGOs and UN agencies to continue to expand their life-saving work. This is the largest allocation that the fund has ever made, and this is again thanks to the support of our donors. These funds will allow us to reach an additional 2 million people with the support they need to survive and face probably one of the biggest challenges of their lives. More than 60% of those that we aim to reach will be women and girls, and a part of the funds will be allocated to prevention of any form of gender-based violence and support survivors, and I'm sure you will agree that this is an absolutely vital priority. Let me also remind you that since February, The Ukraine Humanitarian Fund, together with the Central Emergency Fund, which we call the SURF, have allocated over 158 million for the humanitarian response in Ukraine, making this the second largest source of funds for the humanitarian operation. And why is this allocation from the fund so important and in my view special? This fund is a mechanism that is able to directly support humanitarian partners who are the best placed to operate in Ukraine, even small organizations, because we manage it here in Ukraine, in the country. And with these funds, NGOs, including in areas that are not in government-controlled areas of Luhansk and Donetsk Oblast, are able to, well, just in Luhansk they were able to provide 145,000 people with protection services. They were able to evacuate people from isolated areas of the oblast and distribute water and hygiene to people with disabilities. And dozens of thousands of people displaced in transit areas in Lviv have received hygiene kits. And this happens fast. 4 days after the start of the war, we allocated $18 million to respond to the emergency, and we then increased it to 40 million, given the scale of the needs. So this allocation as well will go directly to organizations working in the most affected areas of Donetsk and Luhansk Oblast and other places in both government and non-government controlled areas. And our partners will also provide relief in Chernihiv, in Kharkiv, in Kherson, Irpin, Bucha, and other Kiev suburbs, Sumy and Zaporizhia. And I want to again to emphasize that a core objective of the funds is to support localization, and we are very pleased to partner with so many outstanding local organizations. And just on the fund itself, I want to say that when this war started, we had 49 partners, and today we are up to 78 partners, including half of them almost are national NGOs. As the crisis coordinator said, in some of those areas like Mariupol and Kherson, it's been extremely difficult and we have not been able to reach them, but we are trying hard every day and we won't give up, and we engaged with both parties, calling on them to urgently facilitate delivery of critical humanitarian assistance to the people in those most hard-hit areas. So thank you all for the support. Thank you for being here. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Osnat, and thank you for especially recognizing the efforts of the national organizations here in the country working to support Ukrainians impacted by this war. No? I want to give the floor now. I know that there are some questions. I'm just going to ask a bit more of time, quick, because we have two more colleagues that want to give you some overview of the work that they are doing here. Is our colleague from the UN Refugee Agency, Carolina Lindholm-Billing, I couldn't pronounce it correct? Yes, please. She's going to give an example of one of the UN agencies working here, especially on protection issues during the war. And then Tatiana from Karita's is also going to give some remarks on the work of Karita's in the country. So we promise to be fast because we know we have questions, and just bear with us a bit more. Thanks.
Thanks. Good afternoon. And yes, as Saviano said, UNHCR is working within the collective humanitarian response, specifically focusing on protection, shelter, and assistance. And one of the things that we see through protection monitoring being done around the country is a very high level of protection risks that displaced people and people living in the hard-hit areas are facing. The number one concern, of course, they raise is direct exposure to shelling and armed violence. Family separation is another one. Restrictions on their ability to move around freely. Many are losing or not having documents to prove their identity that they need to access services. And another issue is obviously the high levels of stress and anxiety, creating a need for psychosocial support. Another key area that people raise themselves in the protection monitoring is lack of dignified reception conditions. I mean, with more than 7 million people internally displaced within Ukraine, there is really an acute need for not only immediate shelter, but also longer-term housing for displaced people. Gender-based violence, obviously, as Osnat mentioned, comes up a lot, and therefore the protection services are also focused on preventing and mitigating the risks. So as one of the actors working in this response, our priority is to really work together with and in support of the government of Ukraine and its local authorities and local communities, all the volunteer organizations and civil society networks that exist in the country and have also been very active in the East over the past years. So on protection, for example, we have been, just recently, we concluded an agreement with the Ministry of Social Policy to work directly with its social protection departments around the country to support their capacity to provide essential services for people with disabilities, older persons, people who have been subjected to gender-based violence and need services of the social protection departments. But then complementing that, we have worked with local NGO partners to provide protection counseling and advice over hotlines, at border crossing points, in reception centers and in communities, and have so far provided 73,500 IDPs and conflict-affected people with protection, advice and services. Multi-purpose cash assistance is another key program that UNHCR, as well as 15 other UN and agencies and NGOs provide to people affected. And the cash assistance, it's a multi-purpose grant that people use to cover basic needs like accommodation, food, hygiene items, clothes and so on, as they've left homes and everything behind. And we also this MOU agreement that we've concluded with the Ministry of Social Policy is really a commitment to work together with the ministry and the national service providers to have our programs aligned with and complementing theirs. And so far, 57,000 internally displaced persons have received cash assistance from UNHCR. More than 100,000 are enrolled and will be receiving cash assistance, and the program is being rolled out in more and more oblasts around the country every day. Non-food items is also part of our programs, especially in areas that are hard to reach. So humanitarian convoys were mentioned, and there UNHCR has contributed to the 5 interagency convoys that have taken place to areas like Sumy, Kharkiv and Chernihiv, and also had convoys on our own. So far, we have reached 270,000 people with essential non-food items around the country. And finally, just on a bit more on this housing need. So there, in addition to helping local authorities expand capacities of temporary reception centers, a priority is now to work with the government, including the Ministry of Regional Development and the Ministry of Reintegration, on expanding housing solutions for IDPs who will not be able to find an apartment and alternative accommodation on their own. And this is includes schemes like cash for rent, also rent support to hosting families, and then looking at refurbishment and repurposing of collective centers where some of the displaced people will be staying for a longer period of time pending more long-term solutions. But this is, as the crisis coordinator said in his introduction, a priority is really to look at solutions from the start, because a collective center or living in a host family is not a sustainable solution for a long term. And these millions of people will need a home. Hopefully some can return to their homes. Some homes can be repaired and refurbished when the area is safe, but there will need to be a variety of housing solutions so that displaced people who are not able to return to their areas will be able to settle and integrate in their new host communities. And there we see that the government is very much committed on long-term solutions and stabilizing the situation. So there we work with them on this. Thank you.
Thanks, Carolina. I know that journalists want to answer questions. Do you want to come, please? And we have now Tatiana Stanivinic from President of Caritas, and she's going to give very quick remarks because, unfortunately, we have to run a bit, and the journalists are going to start with the questions.
Maybe in the interest of journalists, I would encourage us maybe to switch to asking questions, and so maybe if you could limit your remarks to as brief as possible. We do want to make sure that our guests can ask questions. Please.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Again, my name is Tatiana Stavnici. I'm representing Karītas Ukraine, a local NGO organization that's been working on the ground since the beginning of the conflict. I'll be very brief with my remarks as was requested. So again, we were one of the organizations locally based that had a network throughout the country that was able to begin a response immediately as soon as the war broke out on February 24th. We had previous experience working in Eastern Ukraine within the humanitarian community, working very closely, being part of the humanitarian country team, for which we were very grateful for the collegiality and support that we've had with them. We were together an integral part of the effort of civil society that was responding to the immediate crisis. In the first month, we saw a very large numbers of people in transit, of course, as all of us saw them. We were assisting with basic needs in all our shelters. We had 19 shelters who were prepared before the crisis began. We had been doing contingency planning. We've expanded that number to 29 centers. We are offering a variety of services, food, shelter, hygiene, protection services, including psychosocial support, and especially we are moving into support for child-friendly spaces supporting children and their mothers. We've had huge amounts of both local donations that have been enabled us to be able to give support to people in need. We've assisted close to 600,000 people through our programs, only 100,000 of them in the last week. Of this assistance, probably about half of it has been food assistance. That's been the most critical, and about a quarter has been hygiene assistance. I just want to mention, so I'm going to keep my remarks short, that behind all these statistics that we've been talking about are human faces. And that's one of the things that in Karītas that we really focus on, making sure that the people who are receiving the help are also receiving the human dignity and rebuilding a sense of themselves after having lived through various trauma. So maybe on that I'll keep my remarks very short.
Thank you again, and apologies for rushing, and Caritas is indeed one of our key partners here in the humanitarian response. I give the floor for my colleague here because I know that he's gone live in 2 minutes. Can you just say your name and the organization? Yeah.
2 minutes.
Just
It's Max from Süddeutsche Zeitung, Germany newspaper.
Yeah.
Just a question concerning Mariupol. The mayor said there are different negotiations ongoing. What do you know about from the United Nations? Are the United Nations involved in negotiations concerning Mariupol? And on a broader perspective, are you involved in the negotiations for a ceasefire? Thanks.
Okay, I'll go to my colleague there as well, because you want to go live, so we get the 2 questions. Just please say your name and yes.
Thank you very much. And,
no problem.
My name is George Yan, Phoenix Saturday TV. I'm an Australian journalist.
Okay.
And obviously, I've got an interesting. The United Nations in your organization. Do you have more like numbers? Because it looks like wars going to continue. The disaster might spread out. And do you have any contingency to increasing the number of the humanity support? Because we can see a couple of days ago the bombing here in Lviv, and the 7 people died, 11 people injured. So it might increasing. So could you please tell me?
Okay. I will pass the floor to the humanitarian. I just lost him. I don't know if he's still online. You can come? Okay, so Osnat is going to respond. I think she can come in the 2 questions. Let's start, please, Osnat, with the second question, because he's going to go live. You're going live as well? No. So we start with the second question on how we're going to plan to expand the response here in the country vis-a-vis the great. Come.
Thank you very much for your question. So let me just say that as we do hope for improvement and for better things to happen, we are of course also thinking about things getting worse, and this is why we are looking at mobilizing support, being prepared for different scenarios where more people will need assistance. There's a lot that's being already prepared by different agencies, and certainly this thing is on our mind. The war is still ongoing. Of course, we advocate for this war to stop, but we are definitely thinking about the possibility that more people will be in need, and this is also why we are updating the flash appeal to also be sure that we have the capacities and the funds to do that. So that's for your second questions. Look, in terms of the negotiations on Mariupol, I think the messages from the UN, from the Secretary General to the Crisis Coordinator, to all of us is of course that we are calling for pauses, at least for people to be able to come in, to come out in whichever direction they wish, and for humanitarian aid to go in. We are in touch with the different parties to try and negotiate that happens. So that is, but it's an ongoing process. And so far, we have not received the kind of clearances that give us the secure access that is needed in order to be able to do that. But we are continuing to engage and to request access to both Mariupol and Kherson. And perhaps, I don't know if Karolina has anything more to add. Thank you.
Thank you. I just to complement what Osnat said about the flash appeal, as you know, we have launched a couple of months ago a flash appeal with 1.1 billion requests. We have 68% funded today, and on Monday we're going to release new figures on the new financial requests for this appeal. Please.
Thank you very much. I'm Jane Arath from the New York Times. Did we lose the crisis coordinator?
We lose him. I don't know if my colleagues can tell. The connection is lost with the crisis coordinator in Kiev.
I think he had another meeting.
Okay.
I'm sorry. But I hope I can be.
I'm sure you can. Could you give us an idea of kind of numbers you're looking at? If this crisis is going to get worse and you're scaling up, how many more displaced are you making arrangements for instance, and what kind of plans do you have? Thank you.
I think my colleague from the UNHCR can support on that. Karolina?
I think, I think there is an exercise that I believe is ongoing to try and look at the numbers. So I can't really tell you right now, but I do think we have worries that definitely the number will be in several million more people than currently that are in need, that it will grow by several million, but I can't give you the exact number right now.
Sorry, does that mean several million more displaced?
No, in need of humanitarian assistance.
Of the already displaced?
That obviously would include those additional people that might be displaced, yes.
Karolina's going to
perhaps Karolina can add on that.
On Monday, there will be the revised flash appeal and the revised regional refugee plan that will be published then. So then the numbers will be loud. But yes, indeed, more people displaced expected and more people affected, and therefore more greater needs, obviously, and higher targets in the different areas.
Okay, just to give a bit of perspective, when we launched the appeal, the flash appeal in March, we had 2 million people expected to be internally displaced in the country. Now we have 7.7 2 months ago. So it was our provision. This crisis went above any provision that we had before. So it's something that should give some perspective as well. Please.
Hello, Olga Lado, Daily Mail. So Russian forces destroy food warehouses, infrastructures, and in very simple and practical terms, what will these attacks on food supplies mean for local people? And to what extent do you believe that Putin is trying to recreate Holodomor?
I'm not sure if I understood the last part of the question.
Yeah. To what extent do you believe that Putin is trying to recreate Holodomor?
Yeah. Okay.
I have to say that I wish I could read what Putin has in mind. It's not, I wouldn't go that far, but definitely I would say that we are very concerned about the food security crisis, and the food needs are already enormous in Ukraine, and this is why I think in all of the presentations we were talking, it's sometimes, just being able to safely access food. But I think Ukraine also is such a breadbasket for the region and globally. So I think it will also have impact beyond Ukraine, and therefore we hope that, as was mentioned, that there will be a possibility for food production to continue. And for the time being, I know that there is still the markets are still there. So I want to be hopeful.
Where exactly there? The markets?
No, I'm just saying that there was a mention on that the seeding that there will be continued production of food in Ukraine. This is my hope. I think we would not want to see that disrupted, and I think certain organizations are very concerned about that, and we definitely want to support the food security issues of those people that have the need, but at the same time, again, working with the government, working with the partners to also ensure that wherever possible, the Ukraine production of food can continue.
What would be if the help or humanitarian help with food will stop, for example?
What would be if the humanitarian food help will stop, for example?
I think right now, and as we've heard a lot of stories, particularly in the besieged cities, in some of those places, people are really at risk for their lives if food does not arrive. And I think that is why, when we talk about humanitarian assistance and food assistance, you're really talking about a situation where people have nothing to put on the table. So I do think that the food supplies to people that are unable to reach supermarkets, even if there is food there because of the security situation, if we are able to get to them with food, this is very important. I can tell you that, when I was in Kharkiv recently, and we also brought food and medicines there, and when I was speaking to some of our local partners, I think the story was that it's sometimes, it doesn't even matter, like you might have money, but it's not safe to go to the store, or in some cases, basic medicines are simply weren't able to get to the pharmacy, so you can't get them. So that is why we need to bring those through the humanitarian convoys, and that's why it's so important that we are able to have access.
Thank you.
Thank you. My colleague had a joint compliment. In any case, if you need any specific numbers,